Speaking of getting canceled,
Mm-hmm.
now it just dropped that E3 is canceled for 2023. I think it's the death knell for E3, and I think it's the death knell for video games. I think video games are canceled after this year. Yeah, I think gaming is ruined. I think gaming's on the decline. I think this is the first telltale sign of gaming recession, and I think that it's over after this.
I don't think so at all.
E3, it's a trade show like any industry has. Every industry has its big one-time-a-year trade show where everyone gets to show off. All the biggest players get to show off their products, show off all the cool stuff they're doing, generate hype. It's marketing, it's insider, people that work both within the industry, and then the consumers also get to see what's going on. And 2020 and COVID and everything obviously plays a part in this, because it forced all these companies to ask the question of how would they still show off their products and demo their products to consumers and other businesses if there is no E3 conference that's going to host them. So they had to take it fully digital, fully over, conference calls and live stream events and all these different things. So it forced them to innovate a bit on that and prove that they could do it themselves and have more control and do it cheaper.
It's just, to me, a indication of monopoly that is held on the video game industry, or I guess it's an oligopoly in this instance, but it's really just Sony and Microsoft. I don't think Nintendo legitimately had anything to showcase this year, like nothing, and so that's why they weren't going to be there. It's like, well, we don't have any games. Microsoft and Sony, from what I saw, were like, we're doing our own Xbox game studios premiere where we're going to show stuff off for Xbox. Sony's doing their own PlayStation event where they're going to show off their own stuff and have their own convention, completely moving away from these shared spaces and these cooperative networks in which it was about games. And I think that they're really starting to just be like, no, this is about us. I don't know if I'd say games are dead. Like, if this is a sign that games are dead, but like, it's a sign that they are going to be murdered, because the willingness to cooperate and come in a shared space and just make it about video games is clearly dissipating quickly as competition becomes more and more intense between Microsoft and Sony. And I mean, I find this particularly interesting just given the litigation that has occurred over Microsoft's attempted acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Things like this, these major telltale signs of, hey, we're not willing to work together. We're not willing to share a platform. We are going to create as significant of a divide as possible between our products. It's just kind of like, yeah, I mean, that's fine.
The whole console war thing always used to be like dumb as hell. I actually think that if nothing else, if never before, we're actually in the midst of the most legitimate form of a console war that we've ever been in. I think everything before was just like healthy competition of different companies, but now that it's gone legal, now that there's some true skin in the game further than just purely market share, it's interesting to see this collapsing of relations between some of these competing companies. The dismantling of this shared space, this event, it sucks to see it go away. It was cool, but on the other hand, a lot of what E3 always was, it was just overhyping. Sometimes it was smoke and mirrors. Sometimes it was presenting things in a way that isn't very transparent and was trying to essentially trick consumers a little bit, announcing things before it was ready, announcing things and showing things off that weren't at all close to being done. For example, the Halo 2 original E3 gameplay demo, Bungie has gone on the record years later saying that gameplay demo was all smoke and mirrors. It was a lot of it was pre-rendered. None of it, they knew at the time of showing it off that none of it would ever be possible on the original Xbox hardware, that engine needed to be overhauled. Like there was no way it was ever going to ship like in that state. And so it's like, what are you at that point? What are you demoing? What are you showing off? You're making like commercials, but passing it off like it's going to be what the final product is. And it rarely is. It's rarely like that. There's corners that get cut, or there's, hard decisions that have to be made. StarCraft Ghost was another game that was in development hell. Like these games that go into development hell for years and years and years, they announce and they show off at E3 way too early. And then it generates, they're generating all this hype for product that's nowhere near complete. And then it goes into development hell and it never comes out. It never comes out and sees the light of day, and it gets canceled eventually. And it's like, bro, why are you showing stuff off that like is not even, from a business standpoint, is not even settled and stable, let alone the actual product itself? These publishers have to know that a lot of these projects were not where they needed to be, and that it was on shaky ground. So like, why take them to the trade show? Why show it off? It's because it was always about just marketing and overhyping and trying to get people to generate buzz about stuff that may or may not have ever been worthy of that buzz, but they don't care because it's all about that dollar. And so to see a trade show that at its best was a really cool place for these different developers and consumers to see sneak peeks of things and to get, insider info and to see, cool stuff and to meet up, and that's all cool and well and good. But at its worst, it was like just a place to go and lie and put on a show that wasn't legitimate to trick the consumer. So it's hard to actually be upset for E3 to disappear, but these AAA companies and, these publishers, these massive companies, they don't need more exposure. They don't need more abilities to trick the consumer or anything, or generate overhype anything. Like there's already enough overhype to go around without an E3 conference. We've had plenty of overhyping of a bad product the last few years without any E3 conference happening. They can do just fine on their own. And by the way, I also think it's a bad sign that some of these companies really didn't feel the need at all to show up, because they might not have a lot to show off.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Nintendo disclosed we don't have any games to display, so we don't have a reason to be there. I think that there's a couple of interesting points, one that you raised, but one, you have the network effects, right? If Nintendo's not going to be there, if Ubisoft pulls out, it just doesn't make sense for example, Sony to go, right? Because now it's like, well, all of the potential impressions that we would have had of people tuning in to see Nintendo's games and Ubisoft's games are not going to be there. This is going to be less fruitful for us because there's less vendors there, and there's going to be less of an audience now. So you have one, just the network effect side of things. Maybe it's not as profitable for them to go. And then two, the other interesting point is that console wars, as we understood them for the longest time, was really just a debate among the players and the fans. I mean, obviously Sony and Microsoft with PlayStation and Xbox compete with each other. The actual idea and the cultural definition of, did you rock with PS3 or Xbox 360? Which one did you think was better? You died with, that was your console. You were sticking with PlayStation no matter what. And now it's an actual Cold War going on between Microsoft and Sony, where they refuse to cooperate or take action that would benefit themselves if it means benefiting their competition as well. What is the strategic move here? What's the incentive? What's the play, right? Because it's not coincidental, and it certainly would be foolish to believe that every decision made by these trillion-dollar businesses is not calculated, right? So why are they pulling out of E3? Like you said, I don't know about gaming being dead. I don't know if I'd say it's dead, but it's gonna get murdered.
Not being an actual doomer about it, but these are not the signs of things going super well. You know what I mean? At minimum, I actually think one of the biggest casualties of E3 disappearing, I actually think it's indie developers. Like indie developers do not have nearly as much, the smaller studios don't have nearly as much resources and marketing dollars to fund putting on their own presentations, putting on their own live streams. And if they're independent, that means they're not under the umbrella of a publisher like a Microsoft, PlayStation, or Sony, Nintendo, etc. And that means that they're not going to show up in those live streamed event shows, right? So if they're not under a publisher, now they have to actually do it all themselves, on top of making a game independently too. Like, they don't have anyone who's going to market for them. And the independent developers are the ones who are going to suffer the most, because E3 was an advantageous time to get exposure, go to this trade show event, network, get a ton of exposure, all kind of in one shot, in one go. And now, on top of being an independent studio making a game, you have to also independently put on your own presentation and show your product off and market your product even more than you did. Like, E3, had the infrastructure in place and the attention on it where you could get good exposure before, but now that's gone. So what are you going to do? Like, I think the indies are really the people who are going to suffer the most under this. There's a lot of people who look forward to E3 and watching it and hearing about it and going to it and showing off at it, and that sucks too. There's no set like they're returning next year.
Right.
I think it
definitely seemed up in the air.
It at best up in the air, if not just indefinitely canceled. People are going to be tightening their belts a little bit, for lack of a better word. We've already seen the first wave of layoffs from Microsoft. We're probably going to see more layoffs. We're seeing more layoffs in the tech industry in general at a lot of the .coms and social media sites and stuff like that. So, this is just another pain of a potential recession-like state that we will be going into in the near future, possibly by the end of this year. I have read at least that's a lot of these companies are kind of preemptively doing a lot of layoffs because they're anticipating there will be constraints in Q4 of this year. So they're trying to be proactive and, lighten their budgets and their spend and their everything like that to compensate. I don't think it's good for anybody, but it's just how it's going to go. You know what I mean? Like, I think it just is what unfortunately needs to happen.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, you know what to do. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and to keep up with us, join the Game Gains Discord, link in the description.